So we went over the kind of the history of Nu Skin yesterday. I'll talk about that again tomorrow. Let me just start with like the history of Pharmanex, where Pharmanex started, because Pharmanex began with three pharmaceutical scientists. Joe Chang, who at the time was the head of Wyeth Labs. He's actually credited with starting or creating a drug called Rapamune. Rapamune is an anti-organ rejection transplant drug, meaning if you get an organ transplant, there's about a 50% chance that you're going to be injected every single day for the rest of your life with his drug so that you don't reject that transplant. Okay. Then a buddy of his named Michael Chang, no relation. In fact, the one, Joe is Cantonese and Michael's Mandarin, so it's not even the same Smith, as we have here. But he was deputy director of medicinal chemistry at Merck in 1994. And he led the team that invented the drug, the statin drug called Mevacor, which is still today the largest used statin drug in the world. So these guys are really smart. And then they teamed up with another gentleman by the name of Carl Djerassi, who was the head of the Stanford chemistry department. He's the chief inventor of the birth control pill. People say he single-handedly stopped the baby boom, right? Take that for what it's worth. But the fact is, those three individuals were really, really smart and had really good credentials. And they were able to raise $46 million in venture capital from Eli Whitney, the Johnson & Johnson family, and Fidelity Mutual Funds. It's still to date the largest venture capital startup for a nutritional supplement company ever. And they did it off of their credentials. Okay, those three individuals had 75 years of taking a natural plant, find the active ingredient, synthesize that active ingredient into a drug, formulate that into a product, take it through FDA trials, and bring it to market. You're not going to take that 75 years out of their training. What you are going to do is you're going to bring that together and say, what if we keep all of that the same, except we don't synthesize the active into a drug, we just keep it natural? That's the only difference. And the reason drug companies synthesize it into a drug is because then they can patent it and then it's theirs. We can't patent an active ingredient that's natural because God made it. They didn't. Is that fair?
Yes, totally fair.
Hey, now, because of that, they named the company Pharmanex because it stood for Next Generation Pharmaceutical. They wrote the business plan. They said, nobody else is doing this. No one else is doing real science and double-blind, placebo-controlled, crossover randomized studies in the market. What if we did, and what if we became the first? And Fidelity, Eli Whitney, and the Johnson & Johnson family said, yeah, we agree. That makes sense. So in 1994, they started that company in Thousand Oaks, California. And by 1996, they had 5 products that were in 39,000 retail locations. So virtually every retail location in the US that you could be in, they were selling product, and they were doing about $25 million a year in sales. At that point, they were approached by 3 companies that said, we want to buy you. Okay? The first was Pfizer. The second was Eli Whitney, where Joe Chang came from. And the third was Nu Skin.
Oh.
And here's the thing. They had the option. They got to pick. So I think you have to ask yourself 2 questions. Number 1, why would Nu Skin want to buy Pharmanex? And number 2, why would Pharmanex choose Nu Skin over Pfizer or Wyeth to be sold to? So first, Pharmanex, what they did is they actually did some of their own research because they'd never heard of the network marketing industry. They didn't know anything about it. Joe always kind of jokingly is like, Utah? What do they do in Utah? He's like, that's just a state you fly over when you go from coast to coast. And so he started doing his research. And what he did was hired a marketing company and said, how do you sell more product? Right? We're already in 39,000 retail locations. If I go with Pfizer or Wyeth, what am I going to get? I'm going to get more dollars to make commercials and go through that. But how do you sell more product? And you know what? The marketing company came back after doing their research and they said, people are going to buy off of the label and they buy off of price. That's it. Well, the problem with the label is if you've ever gone to a grocery store or something like that, you start looking at the labels, they are all the same. To the average consumer, they all look the same. The average consumer spends less than a minute deciding which product they're going to buy. They don't know what product has what ingredient, which one is great, which one isn't. And so they go off of price. And Joe actually looked at this and he kind of jokingly says, look, I took that and I said, okay. And then he goes, on the way home, I went to the Rite Aid that was close to our home and I looked at what products they had in echinacea. And then I went home and I told my wife, I think I'm getting a cold. Will you go to the store and get Rite Aid, or to Rite Aid and get some echinacea for me? And he went and he said, she didn't pick the cheapest one, but she also didn't spend the most expensive. She went somewhere in the middle. And he always jokes about this, but he's like, he said, when you start a company, it's all you talk about. It's all you do. For 2 years, all I talked about with my wife was ingredients and quality control and pharmaceutical grade and studies and everything else. And my wife walks into the closest store and buys off of price. He said, then I sent her to the store for my son and she bought the most expensive one for him. But it's true. We all make those decisions. We all decide kind of how that works. And so when Pharmanex decided to go with Nu Skin, what he got was us. That was the difference. We were the determining factor of why sell to Nu Skin versus why sell to Pfizer or Wyeth. And what it came down to was we could explain the difference. We could explain why LifePak was more expensive than One A Day or Centrum or any of these other vitamins out there. We could explain that there are double-blind studies. We could explain that there's science behind it. We could explain pharmaceutical grade ingredients and active ingredients and all of that type of stuff that in a store on the shelf doesn't happen. You can't explain it. But why would Nu Skin want to buy Pharmanex? Because the fact is we're a network marketing company, guys. We've earned that reputation. It's the reason that I bring people on these tours is because this is the one thing I can't deliver over a Zoom. I've tried. It doesn't work. You've got to see it, feel it, touch it for yourself to understand that, hey, wait a minute, this is different. This is real. You tell people that we're a multi-billion-dollar company, come see our headquarters. Nobody knows what that means. But then you walk through here and you're like, oh, this is what that means. And everybody takes it differently. Everybody understands it or feels that a little bit different. I had a big-time doctor come in from Manhattan. And he walked in and he's like, wow. And I'm like, yeah, this is pretty cool. He's like, what a waste of space. I was like, well, you live on an island. We live in Utah, right? Like we've got space. And it's just everybody has a different perspective, but you don't know what that is until you see it, until you actually experience it. The other thing was Nu Skin understood that you cannot acquire, you can't attract. They couldn't have paid Joe Chang or Michael Chang enough. How do you get Michael Chang, who's deputy director of medicinal chemistry at Merck? He's the chief scientist in that company. How do you get him to come to a network marketing company and start your nutritional division? You can't. But if you find one that's entrepreneurial enough to start his own company, you can buy that company and then you can bring him in-house. They didn't care as much about the products as the research engine that Pharmanex had created. Because at that point in time, they had about 30 scientists on staff. And so that's what they wanted. That's what they were trying to create. That's what they'd put together. And so they bought those guys and said, come in-house and come work for us. Now, here's the thing. Next time you see Joe, so every single time I ever have Joe present, there are 2 questions I always have him answer. Number 1, why did you let Nu Skin buy you? And you know what he says? I've also sat in these boardrooms, him, meaning I, okay? He has sat in these boardrooms, as has Michael Chang, as has Carl Gerasi, when there's a bad press release and the board squashes a $100 million company like that. It's not worth fighting. It's just, we're done with it. And he's like, I could give my whole baby over to Pfizer and there could be one bad press release and we could be done. I sell my company to Nu Skin. $135 million is a big chunk of change for that company, they're going to have to write it out. They're going to have to go through those times and work with us on it. That was a big turning point. Besides just you and I and what we get from the face-to-face, belly-to-belly explain the difference, that was the other determining factor. And then the other question I ask is, your contract stated that you had to stay here for 2 to 3 years. That was in 1998 when they finalized that deal. Why are we going on 28 years?
Wow.
And you know what his answer is? Because every single year they keep my R&D budget or they increase my R&D budget and they have all the toys for me to play with. Why would I go anywhere else? Like they've kept their word that we will continue to fund your research and development and move things forward. And that's why he stayed. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, this is maybe just more for you and I to talk about. I don't know if you've noticed how much more animated Joe has gotten in the last 12 months.
Yes.
Yeah.
As soon as Prism started becoming more of the focus, he's like, oh, we're back in nutrition. Like this is fun. You guys realize that guy's been to Europe and Asia 4 or 5 times this year? And he's all over the place. That didn't happen 2 years ago. 2 years ago, it was like, please sign another contract to stay 4 more years, right? I mean, I had these conversations with him. I'm sure you did too. It was like, hey, how long are you going to stay around? And now it's like, it's a whole different feeling. It's just a different change. But he is headed up. He is now our chief scientific officer again. You also got Helen Nags, who is head of R&D. I don't know what her official title is, to be perfectly honest. It says Vice President of Global Research and Development. But they head up a team of 75 scientists that span between this lab, our lab in just outside of Shanghai, I always say Asia, and our clinical research center in Beijing. And it's important to understand those pieces. That you have PhDs in 12 different disciplines because not one person can know everything. I jokingly tell people, if you are taking a supplement and there's a face on the back, throw it away, it's crap. Because there's absolutely no way that that one guy knows everything. Maybe it was great when it was formulated, but do you know how many new studies are coming out every single month? One guy cannot read all of the studies, let alone implement everything that's happening. We have a PhD pharmacognosist. It took me a while to actually figure that word out, okay? You know what they do? They don't even have it. She doesn't even have an office here. She has no office in any lab because her job is to go to every source that we source products from and make sure that do soil testing, do how they dry the product, how they package the raw materials, how they do all that at the source and do that. But it's a PhD. That's not cheap. How many other companies do you think have that?
None.
It's a fair bet. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't put my money on it. The average nutritional supplement companies around there have 0 scientists on staff. That's the average. Juice Plus fired all of their scientists in 2012 to 14, somewhere in that standpoint. They haven't reformulated product since then. We've now reformulated LifePak 6 times since then. There's new research all of the time. And I don't know about you guys, but every single time they've reformulated a product, my score's gone up. Something's changed. This last time, all of a sudden it became so much easier to stay compliant. I take it once a day. It's so much easier to take and swallow. It's just tiny little capsules, right? All of that stuff just makes sense because these guys keep putting it together. Okay, one thing on homework tonight, this weekend, I always would challenge people, go to newskin.com, click on company, and then scientific advisory board. Start reading the bios of these people, of these individuals. Okay, you've got Dr. Paul Cox. Hey, anybody seen the movie Medicine Man?
Yes.
I personally believe, I don't have any standing on this, but I personally believe it's based on this guy, on his life. He has spent the vast majority of his life sleeping in some jungle floor in some remote part of the world or someplace, figuring out what indigenous people use in their daily life and then how to apply it to ours. So any product that is epic product, he helped develop that product, and a proceed goes back to wherever he discovered it and found that. So there's a product called Firewalker cream. Anybody ever used it before?
Yes, yep. That's
Awesome for tired feet, tired legs. You know, you're standing all day. He was in the Amazon rainforest with his tribe going through a kind of a rite of passage for the boys. And they would walk across these coals and they take these big leaves and stick them on their feet. And he's like, that's really interesting. I wonder why they do that. So he got a whole bunch of them, brought them back to his lab, started looking through it, discovered a new active ingredient that no scientist knew was found in nature. And that is the active ingredient in the Firewalker cream. And 25 cents from every bottle goes back to the village where he discovered it. Where we built a bridge, which people are like, a bridge? Yeah, because their bridge before was a big tree. And then every rainy season, the tree would get washed away and they couldn't go to school or work or wherever they had to go. So they built them a bridge so it would withstand the rainy season. They built them a school. They've done all this stuff at 25 cents a bottle. Baobab body butter. You guys ever use that stuff?
Yeah.
You're not allowed to say that it is good for mosquitoes, but it is great for mosquitoes. Okay?
Just don't-
Do not say that.
Don't say that.
Don't post it, definitely.
No.
Okay, but the fact is, it works. I was just in Idaho and Montana. It works better than any off or anything else I've ever seen, but we can't say that. But we planted baobab tree every time. We've planted, I think, 2 million trees since we started it. You ever heard anybody from corporate even talk about it?
No.
No, because it just gets lost in the mix of all the good that we're doing, right? But start reading these bios. Why would Zoe Draelos, who's the head of the dermatology department at Duke, who's world-renowned, why would she be associated with a network marketing company? Isn't that for your neighbor that can't get a job? Right? Like, here's what I think, the way in which I look at this. I'm a business guy. Crap, our president has already determined that you can declare bankruptcy in business and recover and be fine. In science and in medicine, can you do that?
No.
No, because it's your name, right? It's your name. So if Zoe Draelos says, well, I'm associated with Nu Skin and I will go speak on Nu Skin's behalf, she's risking her reputation of everything she's done before now. And granted, we do pay her, but we on average pay our scientific advisory board less than $100,000 a year. You think it's worth their reputation?
No.
It's not even close. I mean, he has since passed away, but Dr. Lester Packer, who has the Packer Labs at UC Berkeley named after him, he's got the Oxygen Club, that he founded. He postulated the theory, it was his doctoral thesis like 70 years ago or something like that, that said there are good guys and bad guys that are in our body that are battling it out every day in the aging process and at the nucleus of every disease chronically that you know of. I'm going to call them antioxidants and free radicals. That was his doctoral thesis. He's got 700 published white papers on that topic, 69 college textbooks, and one book called The Antioxidant Miracle that's for you and I. He went on CNN Money and said the Pharmanex biophotonic scanner validates my entire life's work. You can't buy that endorsement. That guy doesn't need our money. And you think he's good? At the time, he was in his mid-80s when he said that. He ended up dying at like 98 years old or something like that. Why would he risk everything to associate himself with a network marketing company? Those are the questions you've got to read these bios and ask yourself, maybe I should talk to my friend. Maybe it is okay, right? Because that's your level of belief is going to determine who you're willing to talk to. Plain and simple. I was joking earlier around with Charlie and some other people, like, I know exactly where the belief level of my team members are determined by who they're putting me in front of. Because if they're putting me in front of all these people, it's like, oh, you haven't had a job in 6 months. Yeah, okay, your belief needs to increase a bit on what we're doing. And you're putting me in front of people that are presidents of companies and own this business and do this and are multimillionaires from this. I know your belief level's at the right level because you start to understand what we have and the mechanisms that are coming together. Yeah, there's one other guy I want to highlight here. Can't see his picture, but Thomas Prola, I think he was right here.
There's a missing.
Okay, so Thomas Prola and Richard Weindruck, they founded LifeGen Technologies. And so Richard was the professor. Thomas was the PhD candidate that worked for the professor. And they did a 20-year clinical on caloric restriction and is still to date the only clinical study that has proven a theory of longevity. Meaning if you eat a meticulously balanced, about 600 calories a day, you will live a longer and healthier, not happier, but longer and healthier life because of that. And it was proven. They've got punch biopsies, they got all this stuff. And what we did is after they published that study, we partnered with them in 2004, came out with our first ageLOC product. And what ageLOC does, simplest terms, is ageLOC mimics a caloric restrictive diet with the use of supplementation or skincare. And so the way I explain that is I always do it from skin, is say, because there was I can't remember the name of the company, it doesn't really matter, but there was a skincare company that came out about 10 years, maybe 15 years ago, that said, we found the fountain of youth. It's called resveratrol. And we put it in our product and it will eliminate your lines and wrinkles. Do you guys understand they got fined $150 million by the FTC for saying that? Because they had no study that proved it. But they sold the heck out of that product before they did it. It's just part of their business plan, right? Does it make any sense that there's, in our complex bodies, that there's one gene or one enzyme that takes care of all lines and wrinkles? That just doesn't, really, when you sit back and think about it, it makes no sense. There's 20 to 30,000 genes in the human body. One of them, all lines and wrinkles. No. But does it make more sense if you go by organ and you say there are 60 genes in the skin tissue that some of them upregulate, some of them downregulate, but they control the aging of your skin organ? That makes a little bit more sense, right? Just to my college dropout brain. And as you put that together, one of those is called elastin. We've all heard of elastin, right? It's what makes your skin snap back. And as you get older, it snaps back a little bit less, right? And the other one is called elastase. Everybody ever heard of elastase?
No.
The only thing that science has ever proven that elastase does is it breaks down elastin. And when you are born and your skin is smooth as a baby's bottom, your body is producing a ton of elastin and no elastase. And as you get older, it goes like this. And so now all of a sudden you start to understand, okay, and this is for Caucasians. I don't know why Asians or African Americans don't have this problem, but Caucasians at age 27, it's over. No more elastin, okay? And then you got these Asians that look like they're 30 and they're 70. It's like, what the heck? You know, it's just not fair, right? But it just starts to work and go through that. And it happens because all of a sudden your body just goes boom and just produces none. But at the same time, it just keeps ticking up the production of elastase that's breaking that down as well. So if we took an ageLOC product and used a Galvanic Spa or a Renew Spa or a Lumi Spa or even just our hand, and we applied one of those ageLOC skincare products to our face or our body, and it was able to